Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com, and welcome to Anti-War News. It is about 9:30 on Thursday night here in Virginia. Last show of the week here. Well, let's hope that it's the last show of the week, because if I have to do something on Friday or Saturday, that means that we have a new war on our hands, and let's hope and pray that doesn't happen. But to get into the news here, the first story at the top of antiwar.com, Congress to vote on Iran war powers bill. So I made this the top story because I wanted this to be prominently on the page through the weekend so people are aware that this vote is going to happen next week. I think it's important to have a recorded vote and for us to contact our representatives and senators and tell them to support this effort. You know, if you have you can make a different argument depending if you have a Democrat or a Republican representative. If you have a Democrat, you could kind of make it more about Trump. If it's a Republican, you know, make the argument about the risk to U.S. troops in the region and the Constitution. So Democrats in the House and Senate vowed on Thursday that they will hold a vote next week on war powers resolutions aimed at blocking President Trump from launching an attack on Iran without congressional authorization, as required by the U.S. Constitution. So contact your representative in the House and tell them to support H-Con Res 38 to prevent the president from conducting an illegal attack on Iran. The resolution in the House was a bipartisan bill introduced by Representative Thomas Massie and Representative Ro Khanna during the 12-day war in June 2025, but a ceasefire was reached before the vote was held, so they're bringing it back up, and they're going to bring it to the floor for a vote. Khanna announced last week that he would bring the bill to the floor, but initially Democratic leadership delayed it. They didn't want the vote to happen, and some of them have come out against it. But now they're on board, and they're saying that the vote's going to happen as soon as they're in session next week. And Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, he also said on Thursday that he expects to vote on an Iran war powers resolution in the Senate early next week. And Kaine's resolution is also bipartisan since it has been co-sponsored by Senator Rand Paul. And there are signs that more Republicans could dissent to get the resolution through Congress, as the Trump administration has not made a coherent case for the war. And this is what Warren Davidson, who's a Republican from Ohio, wrote on X on Thursday. He said, quote, "I have asked for a classified briefing defining the mission in Iran. In the absence of new information, I will support the war powers resolution in the House next week. War requires congressional authorization. There are actions short of war, but no case has been made." End quote. So contact your rep and your senator. Tell them to support this effort. So the next one here, Iran's foreign minister says Geneva talks were the most serious yet. So another round of talks. The U.S. is relatively quiet, and Iran is, again, speaking positively of what happened. So Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said on Thursday that the talks between U.S. and Iranian officials in Geneva were one of the most serious rounds of negotiations yet, though the threat of a U.S. attack on Iran remains, as there were no signs of a major breakthrough. Araghchi told Iranian TV that the talks, quote, "made very good progress and entered into the elements of an agreement very seriously, both in the nuclear field and in the sanctions field," end quote. The Iranian diplomat said that another round will likely be held next week and that U.S. and Iranian technical experts will meet in Vienna on Monday to discuss the details of a potential deal. Oman's foreign minister, Badr al-Busaidi, who mediated the negotiations, also spoke positively of the talks, saying that significant progress was made. However, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. came to the talks demanding that Iran completely dismantle 3 of its nuclear sites, hand over its enriched uranium, and commit to never restarting its uranium enrichment program without significant sanctions relief, conditions that are unacceptable for Tehran. It's a capitulation, essentially, and it's being done at with the threat of being attacked. The U.S. and Iran held a session in the morning, so they had the talks, and they happened. I believe they spoke for about 2 hours in the morning. Then they took a break. They decided to pause and consult with their teams, which isn't a good, usually not a good sign. But apparently during the break, Steve Witkoff and Kushner met with Ukrainian officials. They're also involved in that. It goes to show, they're not really, it's kind of strange to put both of them on both of these things, literally at the same time. So according to Axios, Witkoff and Kushner were disappointed by the Iranian position in the morning, but after reconvening for a second session, an unnamed U.S. official told the outlet that the talks were positive without providing additional details. But overall, the U.S., from what I've seen, maybe I've missed something, but I don't think so, has been relatively quiet. We haven't seen any real comments from U.S. officials about how these talks went, public comments. There was a report from Amwaj Media that said the proposal that Iran submitted to the U.S. included a pledge to never develop nuclear weapons. And, it essentially said the Iranians made a point to make sure that was prominent in the proposal, because Trump is going around claiming that they will not say that they won't develop nuclear weapons, even though they say that all the time. It's the official position of the government. Just blatant lie from the U.S. We've seen Witkoff make similar comments. But this is what an Iranian source told Amwaj Media, quote, "The guiding principles are meant to secure nuclear fuel production in Iran while ensuring no nuclear weapons through measures such as full verification and no accumulation of enriched uranium. This means enrichment would continue only as much as needed," end quote. Amid the negotiations between the U.S. and Iran, President Trump and his top officials have been claiming that Iran may be taking steps toward a nuclear weapon, despite insisting that they obliterated the nuclear facilities. Very weak, very low effort war propaganda. There was even a story in the Wall Street Journal that I reference here that's saying experts and diplomats and all agree. The consensus is that all signs indicate Iran's nuclear enrichment program has been frozen since the U.S. airstrikes. So these claims that they're making, there's just nothing to back them up. And Iran has reportedly offered to formally suspend its enrichment program for 3 to 5 years, an arrangement that would ensure there would be no Iranian uranium enrichment for the remainder of the Trump administration. So, Iran has offered something that Trump could argue is stronger than the JCPOA. And to me, it seems like, no-brainer there. But there's no sign that the U.S. is going to accept that. I don't expect, say the U.S. is going to bomb Iran this weekend, or I wouldn't expect the U.S. to say, all right, that's it, talk's over, now we're going to bomb them. I would expect them to do what happened last time, back in June. They were like, oh yeah, we're going to hold another round of talks, and then Israel attacked. I know I say this all the time, but just remember, you see all this talk from Trump about how he wants a deal. As the Israeli planes were getting in the air to go bomb Iran, he put out a post on Truth Social saying that he was committed to a diplomatic solution. So this could be a ruse. I don't know. I was feeling a little hopeful on Thursday morning that maybe there is a way that a deal could be reached here. But I'm still overall pretty negative. But that doesn't mean, nothing in this world is inevitable for an attack to happen. It's men are going to have to do it. It's not like there's some force that means it's guaranteed. So again, let's really, express our opposition to this as much as we can, in hopes that it is averted. But anyway, the next one here, Senate Majority Leader says an Iran war should result in regime change. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. Senate Majority Leader John Thune said that any strikes on Iran should be aimed at causing regime change. He said, quote, "In my view, if you're going to do something there, you better well make it about getting new leadership and a regime change. If you're going to take some sort of action, I think you want to achieve a result that actually brings about the transformational change that I think we want in the region," end quote. And he's one of several, leading senators and things. They're calling for a regime change. Of course, Lindsey Graham has been all over the place about this. Ted Cruz is another one who's been pushing for this. So these guys really want to see this war. The senior Republican senators. All right, so the next one here: U.S. officials want Israel to attack Iran first. So I might have mentioned this story yesterday. It was big on Wednesday night when it came out. It went around a lot, but I think it's important. It's really crazy. So Politico reported on Wednesday. I said Thursday. I got to fix that. But Politico reported on Wednesday that senior advisors to President Trump would prefer if Israel attacks Iran to launch a war against the Islamic Republic rather than having the U.S. lead the opening airstrikes. The thinking is that if Israel starts the war and Iran retaliates against the U.S., the politics would be better for the administration, and it would be easier to justify the war to the American people. So a person familiar with the discussions said, quote, "There's thinking in and around the administration that the politics are a lot better if the Israelis go first and alone and the Iranians retaliate against us and give us more reason to take action," end quote. So listen to what that person just said there, that the thinking is, so the Israelis attack Iran and then Iran attacks us and then we can go to war. So using Israel to provoke Iranian attacks on the U.S., on U.S. troops in the region, saying, oh, maybe, some American casualties could, we get some dead American troops. That'll get people on board with the war. It's just amazing to me that they put this out there. And, I think the politics, I don't think they're being a very good judge of the politics if they think it'll be more popular if it's more obvious that it's Israel leading the U.S. into this war. But anyway, the Political report said that the belief among senior officials is that the U.S. is going to bomb Iran, that that an attack is going to happen. And this one source who spoke to Politico acknowledged the risk of major U.S. casualties. Quote, "If we're talking about a regime change scale attack, Iran is very likely to retaliate with everything they've got. We have a lot of assets in the region, and every one of those is a potential target," end quote. One thing about Israel that's kind of unsettling me about Netanyahu is the fact that he's been quiet. I haven't seen him saying too much about Iran. And I think that means that he believes he doesn't need to be out there, spewing his regular BS. I think he might be confident that something is coming. The Israeli government has been relatively quiet in the past couple weeks. We saw the same thing back in January when it looked like U.S. airstrikes on Iran were imminent, during the protests, and then Trump backed down. I believe that the thinking was we just don't have the assets in the region to handle the retaliation. Let's start building it up. Then we started seeing this huge buildup. But around the same time, Netanyahu was quiet. He started chirping up a bit later on, but now he's been quiet again, which again I think is a bad sign. But just the fact that they're saying this, thinking this, let's get the Israelis to do it first, and we'll take some hits, and then we'll get the people on board. All right, so the next one here, CENTCOM says Kamikaze drone unit is ready to attack Iran. So the U.S. military's first Kamikaze drone unit is ready for potential strikes on Iran, Bloomberg reported on Thursday, citing a U.S. Central Command official. So CENTCOM first announced, I covered it back in December 2025 when they first announced that they deployed the U.S. military's first one-way attack drone squadron based in the Middle East. They did not disclose the exact location, but it's at one of the U.S. bases in the Middle East. You can see this picture here of the drones. And if those drones look familiar, it's because they are essentially clones of Iran's Shahed 136 drones. The U.S. reversed engineered them and made the exact same thing. So we have Iranian kamikaze drones that are ready to go to attack Iran. It's kind of interesting. I think it goes to show that Iran, has the edge when it comes to the drone warfare. And Russia has their own, version of this now that they use in Ukraine all the time. This is somewhere, Hegseth is saying they're going to pour all sorts of money into making drones like this. Bloomberg quoted a think tank analyst who said that these drones could be used to strike roadways, missile production facilities, and missile launch sites, that they couldn't really be used against hard targets, but things like that, infrastructure, they could be used against. So some of the firepower that the U.S. has brought into the Middle East in recent months. All right, so the next one here, I am of the opinion, you remember the Mar-a-Lago meeting when Netanyahu came and met with Trump? Trump said, he told the press that, he was asked, would you support an Israeli attack on Iran if they continue their ballistic missile program? And his answer was yes. I don't know why people, I do know why. I was going to say, I don't know why people don't take Trump at his word. But sometimes I do think, with some of this stuff, he's saying, we're going to do this. Now he's saying he wants a deal or whatever. But for many weeks, he was just threatening to attack them, making it very clear that he wanted to. So a decision could have been made then. But again, let's hope that they decide to make some kind of deal here. The next one here, Israeli airstrikes kill 2 in Gaza City. So Israeli airstrikes hit Gaza City on Thursday, killing at least 2 Palestinians. As Israeli attacks continue across Gaza in violation of the U.S.-backed ceasefire deal. According to the Palestinian news agency Wafa, Israeli warplanes targeted civilians in Gaza City's northeastern Tuffa neighborhood, and on top of the 2 Palestinians who were killed, dozens more were injured. And on Wednesday night, 2 Palestinians were killed by Israeli strikes to the east of Deir al-Bala, which I did not cover that yesterday, so that was a total of at least 3 people who were killed yesterday. The health ministry hasn't put out a number since yesterday morning, but if these 5 deaths are confirmed, it would bring the total death toll since the ceasefire deal was signed in early October to 623. So the attacks, and it's not like this is every few days, once a week, where you see a Palestinian getting killed by the IDF. This is every day, and barely gets a blip. Even like Al Jazeera, you don't really see this. All right, so the next one here, Israel launches multiple attacks on eastern Lebanon. This is from Jason Ditz. The Israeli military has reported carrying out at least 8 strikes against eastern Lebanon today, centering on the area around Baalbek. Multiple buildings were hit in the area, according to reports, but casualties from the strikes, if any, have yet to be confirmed. So more of the same, more of the usual Israeli strikes in Lebanon in violation of another ceasefire deal. Go on every day, barely get any notice from the U.S. media. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. says that I stumbled over my words there, that Iraq must end Maliki nomination by Friday. I think I am pronouncing his name wrong, but Iraq's coordination framework is still putting forward Nouri al-Maliki as its candidate for prime minister. He's the former prime minister of Iraq, but his the coordination framework, this coalition, is still putting him forward as their candidate, despite the Trump administration demanding that he be withdrawn. And the U.S. reportedly set a deadline of Friday, February 27th, which is tomorrow, to end the candidacy or face an unspecified repercussions. They're threatening sanctions. They're essentially threatening to crush the Iraqi economy, their currency, because the U.S. controls their oil profits and their assets, and are essentially their important assets are controlled by the U.S. Federal Reserve. So the U.S. has that ability, and there could be they could also be looking to see what happens in Iraq if there is an attack on Iran. You have the Shia militias who could potentially get involved. So that might be another factor here, what the U.S. wants to do to Iraq if there is a war, depending on their behavior. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. to allow some Venezuelan oil for Cuba. So the U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control said on Wednesday that it would allow some sales of Venezuelan oil to private businesses in Cuba, marking an easing of the U.S. oil embargo, though it is unclear if the limited sales will bring real relief to the island. The OFAC statement said that its new favorable licensing policy will authorize licenses for companies seeking to resell Venezuelan oil for commercial and humanitarian use in Cuba, but that it would not allow transactions involving any persons or entities associated with the Cuban military, intelligence services, or other government institutions. So no government at all. And of course, Cuba's economy, the state is very, very involved in it. So I don't really know how much relief this might, oil this might actually allow in to Cuba. And of course, we've seen this time and time again with sanctions, where humanitarian carve-outs and things don't address the real issues and still cause, the sanctions still cause humanitarian crises and things. So since the attack on Venezuela to abduct Maduro, the U.S. has been controlling Venezuela's oil shipments. And so they cut off Venezuelan oil and Mexican oil. They pressured Mexico with tariffs. And that was about 80% of Cuba's imports, oil imports. And as far as I'm aware, they haven't been getting oil from any other country at the moment either. So this is serious. You cut off all oil imports to an island nation like Cuba, there's going to be problems very, very quickly. And of course, we've seen that. There's people who predict by the end of this month, we could see total blackout in Cuba. So we'll see if, with this little change, because this happened after Rubio met with Caribbean leaders who are like, not very into this whole idea. So, it could be related to that. It could just be a symbolic thing just to make it seem like they're trying to do something to ease the suffering there. But it'll become clear, I guess, in the coming days and weeks if this really makes a difference. All right, so the next one here, Anthropic rejects Pentagon's final offer on AI. This article is from Axios. So Anthropic, the AI company that is involved with the Pentagon, is rejecting the this final offer that has been given by the U.S. War Department, Hegseth's War Department. And this is what they said in a statement, quote, "The contract language we received overnight from the Department of War made virtually no progress on preventing Claude's use for mass surveillance of Americans or in fully autonomous weapons. New language framed as compromise was paired with legalese that would allow those safeguards to be disregarded at will. Despite the Department of War's recent public statements, these narrow safeguards have been the crux of our negotiations for months," end quote. So just to recap here, this company, Anthropic, the Pentagon uses their Claude AI system, and they're asking for two guarantees: that this technology is not used for the mass surveillance of Americans, and that it's also not used for autonomous weapons that that are fully autonomous with no human oversight. And the Pentagon is not willing to agree to that. And that, to me, is very scary, especially you have other companies that don't seem to have any moral problems with this, like Palantir and such. But yeah, they don't want to budge on this at all. So their deadline is Friday at 5:01 p.m. And then we might see the Pentagon take serious action against this company here for not wanting to be involved in the mass surveillance of Americans. All right, so the next one here, the last story, explosions in Kabul after Afghan attack on Pakistan. So this article is from AP. I was vaguely paying attention to the tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan, but not enough. But it's one of those things. It's like, what country happens to border Afghanistan and Pakistan, where now there's all of a sudden this war breaking out? Of course, that's Iran. It just makes you wonder if it's related. So Pakistan carried out airstrikes in Kabul and two other Afghan provinces early Friday, Afghanistan's government spokesman said, hours after Afghanistan launched a cross-border attack on Pakistan and the latest escalation of violence between the neighboring countries that made a Qatar-mediated ceasefire appear increasingly shaky. At least 3 explosions were heard in Kabul, but there was no immediate information on the exact location of the strikes in the Afghan capital or of any potential casualties. Government spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid, I haven't heard that name in a while. That's the Taliban spokesman. He was, I just remember his statements when Trump was negotiating the deal with the Taliban. I just remember reading that name a lot. But he said that Pakistan also carried out airstrikes in Kandahar to the south and in the southeastern province of Paktia. 2 senior Pakistani security officials told the AP that Pakistan's military carried out airstrikes targeting what they described as Afghan military facilities in Kabul, Kandahar, and Paktia provinces, allegedly destroying 2 brigades' bases, but they didn't mention possible casualties. There's reports of casualties in clashes on the border, but tensions seem pretty high. And it seems like this is going to escalate. So Afghanistan said that the their strikes in Pakistan were retaliatory. So Mujahid said, quote, in response to the repeated rebellions and insurrections of the Pakistani military, large-scale offensive operations were launched against Pakistani military bases and military installations along the Durand Line, end quote. And that's the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. There's two different casualty figures. Afghanistan's defense ministry says that 55 Pakistani soldiers had been killed. It put out its own casualties at 8 killed and another 11 wounded. The ministry said that it destroyed 19 Pakistani army posts and 2 bases. Pakistan's information minister, however, said that the number of Pakistani soldiers killed stood at 2, with 3 others wounded, so very different death tolls, and they're saying 36 Afghan fighters have been killed. So another conflict here to keep an eye on. So that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints, one from Chris Hedges, The Suicidal Folly of a War with Iran, one from Ted Snyder and Nikolai Petro, How to Bring Peace to Ukraine, one from Matt Wolfson, The Gaza Plan's Sick Kind of Detachment and Its Dangers for America, one from Dan Steinbach, The Fatal Costs of the Philippines-Taiwan War Scenario, and our spotlight from Ben Armbruster, The White House Wants Iran to Attack Americans. So please go check all of that out. And that's it for me for today. That's it for the week. Sorry, I was kind of stumbling and mumbling a bit there. I'm extra sleep deprived today. My children had me up a lot last night and then very early this morning. But anyway, so again, hopefully no war this weekend. Hopefully no war at all. And that somehow a deal comes out of this. Call your representatives and senators. It doesn't hurt. It's easy to do. Yeah, that's it. I hope everyone has a nice weekend. I will be back in a few days. Thanks for listening.